October 9th, 2017. Beverly Hills, California. 6 hours before his mother's body was found, he was on Skype with a financial investor. The message he typed, "If I get a mill, I'd want you to manage it." $1 million? 6 hours before anyone even knew she was dead. That one message is what the prosecutor called consciousness of guilt, and it's the detail that makes this entire case impossible to explain away. But to understand why it matters, you need to know who Violet Yacobi was, and how her son ended up standing over her body pretending to grieve. Violet was 67 years old, a widow, a grandmother, a woman who had left the Soviet Union decades earlier with almost nothing and built a life that most people only dream about. An $8 million mansion on North Roxbury Drive in Beverly Hills, a community of close friends, 2 adult children, and a family estate valued at around $12 million. Her husband Solomon, a physician, had died the year before. Violet had spent the following 12 months in a period of mourning, quiet, close to family, slowly preparing to return to her social life. Friends described her as someone whose entire purpose was making the people around her happy. She had no idea what her son was planning. That evening, someone parked a car behind her mansion, walked inside, and strangled her. Her body stayed on the marble floor of the entryway until the following evening, nearly 24 hours later, when Daniel and his sister Dina arrived after family members couldn't reach her by phone. They called 911, said they'd found her at the bottom of the grand staircase. Officers arrived assuming a fall or a suicide. She'd been depressed. Her dog had just died. She'd canceled the cleaning lady. The anniversary of her husband's death had just passed. It had the shape of a tragedy. But then Detective George Elwell looked at the staircase railing. It was covered in dust, top to bottom, the entire length of it. Not a single disturbance. No handprint, no scuff mark, no sign that anything or anyone had gone over it. He pulled Detective Mark Schwartz aside at the station that night and said 4 words. "We need a search warrant." They went back to the house at midnight, asked Daniel and Dina to walk them through it. The railing was just over 3 feet high. Violet was just under 5 feet tall. For her to fall over accidentally, she would have had to climb, and the dust said she never touched it. Elwell put it simply. Anything going over that railing with any weight to it, momentum would carry it away from the staircase. But Violet's body was found tucked underneath, close in, not thrown outward. The physics didn't work. The dust didn't work. The position didn't work. And then the medical examiner's findings made everything clear. Petechiae, the rupturing of tiny blood vessels around Violet's eyes and face. A significant abrasion along her jawline. A second mark just below it on her neck. These are the classic signs of strangulation. Not a fall, not a suicide. Someone had wrapped their hands around this woman's throat and squeezed until she stopped moving. Then arranged the scene to look like an accident. Now investigators had a homicide, and they had a suspect in mind almost immediately, because Daniel's behavior from the very first night hadn't sat right with either of them. During the walkthrough, Elwell watched Daniel move around the spot where his mother's body had been found, crouching, touching the tile, shifting from side to side. Not like a grieving son trying to make sense of a tragedy, like someone checking to see if they'd left anything behind. Schwartz noticed something different. Daniel was eager, cooperative to the point where it felt performative. Nervous energy underneath a surface of helpfulness. And the stories didn't line up. On the 911 call, Daniel told the dispatcher that his sister was performing CPR on their mother. But later, talking to detectives, he said he had also done chest compressions. When Schwartz called Dina separately, she confirmed Daniel had done no CPR at all. Small lie, but it was the first crack. Then came the alibi. Daniel told police he had worked at his dental practice in Inglewood that evening and driven straight home. Didn't go anywhere near his mother's house. Cell tower data said otherwise. GPS records from his white Jaguar placed him in the vicinity of the North Roxbury Drive mansion on the night of October 9th. The night Violet actually died, not the night her body was found. He had been there, parked behind the property, and said nothing about it. Investigators started building a fuller picture of who Daniel Yacobi actually was underneath the cooperative, helpful son routine. A neighbor's brother testified that Daniel had told him he hated his parents, that they had pushed him into dentistry against his will, that his mother was controlling, that he resented the life they had constructed for him. Another family friend told police that weeks before Violet died, Daniel had brought up inheritance taxes out of nowhere. And when the friend seemed surprised, Daniel got visibly agitated and dropped the subject. His search history on his phone included terms related to chokeholds and choking-related deaths. And then, the Skype message. Sent at approximately 1 p.m. on October 10th, roughly 6 hours before Daniel and Dina discovered their mother's body. A conversation with a financial investor about managing $1 million that Daniel apparently already expected to receive. He knew she was dead. He had already started planning. Daniel was arrested in February 2018, 4 months after the murder. He pleaded not guilty. His legal team argued that Violet's injuries were consistent with blunt force trauma from a fall, not strangulation. They pointed out she had no defensive wounds, that she was on prescription medications, that the forensic evidence was open to interpretation. They also noted that Daniel had recently secured a $1 million loan for his dental practice, suggesting he didn't actually need his mother's money the way prosecutors claimed. The jury wasn't persuaded. What the defense couldn't explain was the GPS data, the Skype message, the inconsistencies in the CPR story, the searches about chokeholds, the dust on the railing that said nobody fell over it, and a forensic expert who testified clearly that the marks on Violet's face and neck were consistent with hands, not marble floors. The trial began in July 2025. 3 weeks of testimony. 8 years after Violet was found in her own entryway. On August 22, 2025, the jury deliberated for less than a full day. Unanimous. Guilty of first-degree murder for financial gain. At sentencing, Daniel Yacobi stood up and addressed the court, said he would never harm a hair on his mother's head, said he was not a murderer, said he was a law-abiding citizen being wrongfully punished. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving that sentence at California State Prison in Lancaster, California. He was 44 years old at sentencing. Violet Yacobi left the Soviet Union with nothing and spent decades building something extraordinary. A home, a family, a community that loved her. She was just beginning to come back to life after losing her husband. Her son decided that inheritance was worth more than her time. The dust on that railing told investigators everything they needed to know on the very first night. It just took 8 years for a jury to hear it. Shadow Dossier. Subscribe so you catch the next case.